wanted to just clarify, address, whatever. We have chosen not to appeal the Brad Evans red card. The reason for that is that although we always support our players, and that's always our preference. What matters in situations like this is not what we believe, but what we can prove. So, to give you guys a little background on the process, this review of a red card is not done by the disciplinary committee, but rather a separate independent committee of 3 referees. So, and you have to prove to this committee of referees that their colleague made a serious and obvious error, and that's the legal standard: serious and obvious error. So, and as to provide some more color, that means if you showed the video clip to 100 people, 100 people would say this is a clear and obvious, that word obvious is in there too, error. And in our conversations internally and with folks around the league, we didn't feel like we were able to meet that standard, and therefore we chose not to appeal. So to be clear, Evans is charged with violent conduct and attempting to strike an opponent. I think you can parse that and say he wasn't technically attempting to strike Edgar. They're in very, very close proximity, but again, when you have a head movement like that, it's pretty quick and pretty unexpected. I think it's hard to reach the standard of serious and obvious error by the referee that he couldn't possibly have construed that as something in the direction of Edgar when those guys are so close like that. So that's the Evans stuff. Any questions on that one? Or?
Yeah, Garth, I got one. Since you have power in the room, can you talk about the turnaround of the team? And,
sure. I like talking about that. That's a lot more fun than red cards. The team's been awesome, man, and Brian has done a great job, and he's, the idea of empowering the team and making this their team and getting the guys collectively together and in line to try to make the playoffs. And I'd also stress we haven't accomplished, that goal yet, but we've obviously put ourselves in a position to do so. And if we can get over that hump, that'd be a real accomplishment considering where we were. But even then, again, I'll stress that making the playoffs is not the goal of this organization. The goal of this organization is to compete for championships and to win titles. And that is, what we want to do if we're able to make the playoffs then is to say, hey, can we get a home game in the wild card game? And if we can do that, I think that helps us in terms of our playoff push. But look, if we're not able to do it, we'll get in however we can get in. And once you're in the dance, everybody's got a chance. So we're going to do our best to try to win this thing. And it starts with trying to beat Houston. And you got to win those little battles before you can worry about. GMs get the luxury of worrying about these larger strategic goals. We got to win. We got to beat Houston, and it ain't going to be easy because they've been playing much better lately. Two other things, just real quick clarifications, and I'll open the floor again. With Ladero and Morris, Morris it's up to U.S. Soccer as to whether or not he's released or not. They've been very respectful with us with the Dempsey process, and I want to make sure that we are returning the favor to them. It'll be up to them if Jordan is released or not. Obviously, we hope that he is, but that's something that is ultimately U.S. Soccer's decision. They have the right to bring him in for those games, and it'll ultimately be up to them. And with respect to Ladero, again, he has to physically get from Barranquilla, Colombia to Seattle. And look, you can go online and you can construct a flight itinerary that will accomplish that fact. That doesn't mean that it's a good idea for Nico, depending on how he plays and how he feels. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily a good idea for our team. Because again, the thing that I think we've gotten right is that we're in this together as a group. And I think that the result in Vancouver showed, we can win, with any articulation of that group, any change. And again, do you want to have your best players around? Of course, but we got to do this from a common sense approach, and not put our players in danger, and likewise give our group the best chance where we're not just willy-nilly trying to get guys in here so we can play a couple of minutes in a game.
What about Roman? I know that Brian said it was kind of out of his hands, but did you have any conversations with Panama as to why he was not called up?
We did not. Look, the federations call us, Matt, when they want to call players up. So we did not receive a call from Panama this time. So I did not get into the who and the why with them, but just we were happy that Roman wasn't called up, and Panama's in contact, honestly, with Roman more often than they are with us. The conversation with the the communication with us tends to be official. Here's our email officially requesting his release for these games and these dates. The informal stuff tends to go to Roman, and that dialogue is no doubt ongoing between him and the coach and the team, etc.
Yeah, you said Morris. I mean, it sort of kind of comes down to diplomacy behind the scenes at that point. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I give the U.S. team credit, though, too, right? I think that they are respectful of MLS, and they understand that, a successful domestic league is going to ultimately yield a better national team, yada, yada, yada. So, and look, we need to be careful, again, not to put Jordan in the middle of this as well.
Yeah.
But, so, yes, is it dependent on, working together? Yeah, sure it is. But, again, I think that the U.S. national team in general has been, and Jurgen has been, pretty respectful in general with this stuff.
For sure, but the league schedule, I mean, it does seem on some level to be seem a little bit ridiculous that having a key player for a key game in the playoff race could come down to that, essentially, into how they're feeling on a certain day, essentially.
Yeah, and again, I want to give the U.S. national team a little bit more credit than that. I do think that they are sensitive to key player, key game, and those kinds of things. I just want to stress it's ultimately up to them. They are aware of those circumstances, and I do think that they will potentially play a factor in how they make their call. But look, the larger issue of can we continue to play in FIFA dates? Look, it's just a practical matter of how many weekends we have in a year, and as soon as you say you're not going to play in a FIFA date, you're eliminating a weekend, which puts us into a midweek, and then you just we have stadium availability issues with CenturyLink. You then have how many midweek games can you reasonably play? So, from a fixture congestion and player safety standpoint, so it's a very complex question. In general, our philosophy is that we don't want to play on any FIFA dates. I would tell you that at least right now in this stage of the league's evolution, it's very difficult to impossible to say carte blanche, we're never going to play on a FIFA date, because I think probably that we will have to play on one or two FIFA dates going forward. Again, we will try to push as much as we can to not play on those dates, and as the league evolves, as we have multiple TAM players, multiple DPs, you're talking for us the potential for half a dozen call-ups on any given international weekend. It's obvious that we don't want to play on FIFA weekends from that context, but again, it's not just us, right? We have to be supportive of the league, and we have to be supportive of our relationship with CenturyLink Field, and again, it's got to make business sense and soccer sense.
For sure, and at this stage of the league's evolution, obviously a caveat. But in a perfect world, if you are going to play from March to November, what could you do differently in a perfect world to avoid these conflicts a little more often?
I mean, look, you could reduce the number of games in the schedule. That's not going to happen, but that's something that you could look at. I mean, and I would say this, to my knowledge, I think this is the first FIFA date that we've played on this year.
Yes.
And so at the end, and again, we're all sensitive about this, right? Because we're in a key player, a key game, playoff chase, all these kinds of things. And you could look at it differently and say, hey, look, if we'd had a more consistent season, then maybe this game wouldn't be so critically important at this time of year. So, look, it's not perfect. It's not black and white. I think we have been successful in limiting the number of FIFA dates that we played on. We're going to continue to try to do that.
Sure.
When you take in consideration how exhausting it is to play in Barranquilla, like you said, he plays on a Tuesday, is that decision of maybe playing or not playing more led to the player, or do you guys
Well, it's up to Uruguay's national team coach first, right?
Right.
And look, it'll start today because Uruguay play today at home. We'll see how much he plays in this game, and because it's cumulative minutes, right? It's cumulative minutes, and it's a long trip. And when you fly from Uruguay to Colombia, that's not exactly around the corner either. So, again, you just want to put players in positions to succeed. I will tell you this, that Nico's absolutely willing to do this. He's willing to move heaven and earth to get here to be supportive of his teammates. Again, I think it's indicative of what a good person he is off the field, as well as how talented he is on the field. So we feel really, really good about that. Again, it's just about what's good for the group and what's good for Nico.
Do you know Jovan Jones, is he going to be able to be back by Wednesday as well, or is it guaranteed not?
That one I think actually is physically impossible to get him back here. Now, I'm sure someone will go on the internet now and prove me wrong, but he is way down south in terms of where he's playing, and I think it's very unlikely, given some of the connections he'd have to make, that he'll make it back.
And it's unlikely that he'd be released early as well.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of being released early, it's a wonderful thing to talk about, and but I mean, in that case too, Trinidad's playing qualifiers. Those games qualify them for the Gold Cup, and so again, I just think it's totally unrealistic to expect Trinidad to release a player for a game that literally means a lot of money to their federation qualifying for the Gold Cup. So, That's the reality of those. I think there's only flexibility really when you're talking about playing friendlies, because I think if the U.S. team had qualifiers, I don't think we'd be talking about releasing Jordan Morris from those either. And that's Matt. Go back to your original question. If we can identify FIFA windows where CONCACAF play friendlies as opposed to qualifiers, you can try to work around that. But again, now you're in this conundrum of, all right, but CONMEBOL's the South American schedule might be different than CONCACAF. Europe might be different than them. So, I mean, you kind of have to look at your team every year and say, okay, which guys are going to get called in, and then can you pick dates that those guys aren't going to miss based on their confederation? But that's going to be an ad hoc thing going forward.
Is that kind of like, is all those complications, is that kind of a bad look for the league in general, though? I understand that it's kind of, you can't do a lot about it, but in general, when you look at the fact that you have to have all of these conversations to talk about how you're going to construct a roster for a potential playoff type game.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, again, in a perfect world, we'd have all our guys, right? But part of where we have to get as a league, right, is we all say we have to make the league better. Though we make the league better by playing young players. Giving young players experience in big games is a really great test for them, right? So, and oftentimes young players are best able to succeed when surrounded by veterans. So what you don't want is these games at the end of the season where you play a bunch of young kids because you're out of it or the spot's clinched or whatever. You want to introduce them, one or two at a time, and I do think that this game might give us an opportunity to do some of that. That's the positive that I would take away from it, that as the developing league, opportunities for young guys are not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Garth, what's a process? Does Smets watch all the games? You watch all the games? You guys talk? I mean, what is that evaluation process on the players?
It's getting to the point where I'm not convinced I can watch every game every weekend. I mean, between all the qualifiers and all the league games, and it's just a lot of hours. But no, I mean, look, we divide them up. I mean, most of our guys are going to go away and play in these internationals. I mean, in this case, you're going to watch Jovan with Trinidad, you're going to watch Nico with Uruguay, and you're going to watch Jordan with the U.S. Like, and all of those are at different times, so that's practically that's doable. Every call-up window, it may not be doable. But yeah, somebody between Chris and Brian and me and Kurt, the player personnel staff, the front office staff, and the coaching staff, someone will watch everything. And then you'll look at form and how they're doing and how they look, etc.